It's 2013, and a new Congress has arrived in Washington, D.C. to tackle our nation's toughest problems. Our economy is barely sputtering along, and unemployment remains high after 4 years. Yet, with 22 million Americans out of work or underemployed, earning less than before, what is the priority of our lawmakers in Congress? Granting amnesty to millions of illegal aliens, and on top of that, creating new programs that would admit hundreds of thousands of new guest workers each and every year. Advocates for such a plan call this comprehensive immigration reform. These lawmakers insist that this is the way to fix our broken immigration system. But this isn't the first time we've heard these arguments.
Immigration reform, if it is to happen, has to be comprehensive. I think that's been something that everyone has acknowledged. It has to include sanctions. It has to include legalization. It has to include strong enforcement. And it has to include a provision that deals with the needs of agriculture.
By making these people come forward out of the shadows, out of that sub-rosa economy, we're going to help the United States.
We have 1.8 million people coming across the borders, as the good gentleman from California has outlined. We have millions more people living in limbo, unprotected in our cities, in our towns, in the country. And if we don't do immigration reform, we're not going to solve either of those problems, both of which dwarf any problems that some might feel would be created by this proposal.
If anybody believes, and I know some sincerely do, that we can round up every illegal alien that's here and send them home, I think they're sadly mistaken.
What is it not? It is not millions of people cascading across the borders. The best independent analysis we have, the Congressional Budget Office, estimated that even before it was tightened up, that it would mean maybe 250,000 people across the borders. It is not welfare benefits for those folks immediately. In fact, it's in the bill right now that they cannot get AFDC benefits, even though I might believe they should. It is not, as was said before, immediately. Gentleman from Nebraska stated immediately wives, husbands, children would come across. Not the case.
The fact of the matter is we have a crisis. It seems to have been recognized everywhere in the United States except in Washington, D.C. on Capitol Hill, at least if you judge by the success of our attempts to have meaningful new legislation.
Calls for amnesty and guest workers were the centerpiece of the 1986 Amnesty Bill. That's right, 26 years ago, the U.S. House of Representatives and Senate passed the Immigration Reform and Control Act, a bill meant to give amnesty to illegal aliens, bring in more guest workers, and improve immigration enforcement. Did it work? The 1986 bill immediately granted amnesty to 3 million illegal aliens. New guest worker programs began, yet the enforcement Congress promised never came. And as illegal aliens got jobs and government benefits, legal immigrants waited patiently in line. Now, 26 years later, the problem of illegal immigration has only gotten worse, with approximately 12 million illegal aliens now living in the U.S. Yet here we find ourselves again, hearing our lawmakers argue that giving amnesty to 12 million illegal aliens is the key to fixing our broken immigration system. Some understood the consequences of passing a mass amnesty bill and warned us.
Unfortunately, this bill is not immigration reform. It is amnesty for literally millions of illegal aliens masked in the cloak of protecting the borders of the United States.
By passing a legalization provision, a date like January 1, 1982, where you grant the equivalent of blanket amnesty, we can fudge about the term, but that's basically what it is, to everybody who's been here for any time since that date. By doing that, we are in effect sending a signal to those across the border to come over here and try to get the fraudulent documents necessary to get to stay here, and to others who might not be willing to try the fraudulent route, we're saying we've done it once now, we'll probably do it again. And I think that's a horrible magnet message to be sending out.
We should not invite people to come here and live illegally so we can have maids and so we can have servants. We ought to send a consistent message to the world. We have established a policy that only those people that are here legally will be allowed to have a job in the United States.
It seems to me it is very unfair particularly to to have legalization in this bill unfair, particularly to those who stand in line and have stood in line for years and years by the thousands to come to this country in a legal fashion, whatever country they're from in Europe or any other part of the world. And therefore, legalization that we're putting in this bill for the illegals is dead wrong on a fairness ground.
So what we have when this bill passes and plays out in 5 years are no employer sanctions left, but millions of people who are on the road to citizenship and will be eligible for public assistance and free public education because they are here under color of law.
It's wrong to have legalization and reward lawbreakers, and that's exactly what those illegals here today are. As much compassion as we may have for individual cases, they are breaking our laws that say you have to go through certain particular procedures to come here.
There is a better solution that works. Enforcing the immigration laws that are on our books, mandating use of an employment verification system called E-Verify, and ending benefits to illegal aliens at the federal and state levels will remove the magnet that brings too many to our country illegally. We also need to reduce the number of guest workers and reform our legal immigration system to make it benefit our nation, not hurt the generations of immigrants who have come in years past. That is true immigration reform. Comprehensive immigration reform is just a code for mass amnesty. So let's learn from the obvious failure of the 1986 Act. Amnesty rewards lawbreaking and encourages continued illegal immigration. If we go down the same road again, we will be having this conversation in the not-too-distant future with the nation that much closer to the brink. It's time to get serious about addressing this problem before it's too late.
Well, I hope you've enjoyed this trip down memory lane. It's a sobering thing to hear these politicians 25 years ago making a lot of promises to the American people, none of which they decided to bother keeping. Sure, the illegal immigrants got their amnesty. Millions and millions, they got to bring relatives and jump the line, but what did the American people get? We're entitled to a fair deal. Fair immigration reform, true immigration reform is what's actually in our interest, the American people, our kids, American workers, hardworking families. We need to make sure politicians don't get away with telling the same lies again. We need to hold them accountable and remind them we've learned something in the last 25 years. I think we owe it to everybody in this country not to repeat the same mistakes. Recognize there are reasons why the immigration laws are not being effectively enforced. To recognize there are special interests that want to prevent effective immigration controls for the national interest. We have to take them on in this political debate. By going to our website, fairus.org, fairus.org, you get all the information that you need to make informed decisions about what's real and what's fake, what's a reward for lawbreaking, what are special interest visas, or what's actually going to give us downstream effective immigration controls. At FAIR, you have the national interest at your back. We're here to help you. Join us. Thanks.